Sharon Wolf, Assistant Professor of Education at the University of Pennsylvania, here with the CPRE Knowledge Hub. And joining us today is Lauren Burdette, the Managing Director of Education Policy for Governor Rauner's administration at the state of Illinois. Welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's start off by just telling us a little bit about your day-to-day responsibilities working with the governor.
Probably the first rule is that there is no typical day. There's anything from school visits and visiting universities and representing the governor in those spaces to making sure that we're doing meetings with stakeholders, hearing their concerns, learning about how effective any of the policies are that we've either attempted to implement in the past or that are on their way to being implemented. Our office frequently meets with legislators on bills that they'd like to introduce. We negotiate with them as part of the larger governor's office team. We also do a lot of work representing his views internally in the government. Illinois has a large state agency presence. We have 17 state agencies that have some sort of education policy and programming. And so coordinating across those agencies is a more than full-time job. I think another sort of aspect of this is attending stakeholder events on behalf of the governor. He's obviously a busy man, and Illinois is a big state, and so frequently our team goes to education stakeholder events, panels, things like that, just to hear what folks are saying, hear what the new initiatives are, particularly across the state in different regions.
And how has the National Governors Association helped in your role?
Actually, the first item I did when I started this job was apply for a National Governors Association Human Capital Grant. And Illinois has had a teacher shortage issue that's been growing for several years, and we haven't done a ton to address it. Unfortunately, that's a problem that's common in many states across the country. And so NGA provided a learning grant to try and help us figure out, develop a strategy and a set of recommendations for what to do. So fortunately, we won the grant. So we got $10,000 from NGA. And what we did with that money was pulled together stakeholders across Illinois, deans of education, advocates, union members, researchers from some of our universities, and some policy advocacy folks, got them all in a room together and met monthly at least for about 8 months and came up with a set of recommendations to address sort of the whole pipeline. Because we were on the front end of this, we developed our report, published it, disseminated it, and this year the teacher shortage is the hot topic in our General Assembly and across our state. So we have this really fantastic resource developed already that we can use and say, look, here are some of the priorities that it's not just the governor's office, this is a group of stakeholders that recommended this.
What is something that you have learned from this policy work that you feel your colleagues in other states would benefit from?
I think the value of putting time into establishing those stakeholder relationships cannot be overstated. I think particularly when, we all exist in political environments, and it's really easy to cast someone as far left or far right and to assume things about what they believe when it comes to policy. And in reality, when you sit down at a table and you use data and research to say, here's the reality of our state right now, you find much more common ground and you find it faster than you would otherwise. A good example of that is arguments about teaching can quickly devolve into union conversations. And one of the things that we recognized is that in Illinois, we don't have an oversupply or an undersupply of teachers overall. What we have is an oversupply in specific areas, like social studies, for instance. And we have an undersupply in special education, bilingual, and a lot of the STEM high school subjects. We also have regional shortages that vary quite widely. So being able to sit and actually look at data and talk about that with folks who you may disagree with on other issues allows not only for common ground and good relationship building, but also helps you come to a more intelligent solution.
And what advice would you have for education researchers to do their work in a way that can really support the policymaking process?
I think researchers are so vital to the policy conversation because what I've noticed is that people in political roles, whether they're elected or they're just in policy tables, spaces, constantly cite data this. Well, the data says this, the data says this, but rarely does anyone cite that information and where it comes from. And I think what researchers can be helpful with is first being at those tables. And that requires time, which I know is tough. But being there and explaining their research in layman's terms is really helpful. There are not very many tables we can sit at where p-values can be discussed and people understand what that means, or various, regression models. Like there's a need for bringing that level of research into dialogue, but also explaining it. And I don't ever know if that's the same person who should do that, but I see a real need for bringing researchers more into the policy conversation. And just having those introductory meetings with, key folks on education committees, with folks in governor's offices, even with folks in the agencies sometimes is really helpful. I also have noticed that Professor Studenarski from University of Michigan has, she's kind of a superstar at this point. And one of the reasons I think is that she's done a really good job of translating her research into New York Times op-eds and, talking to congressional hearings. And that's a helpful way to make something that's as complex as student loan policy accessible to policymakers and also more average folks who don't have the time to sit and look through data output.
Well, thank you so much. It was great to talk with you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for interviewing us. We have a lot of good stuff happening in Illinois.